A very good morning to all my dear students. In the previous tutorial, we had done our lesson 2, the thief story. Here we are going to begin with our fifth lesson, footprints without feet. There are certain points you need to keep in your mind. First, about the writer, theme of the lesson, message of the lesson, characters of the lesson, vocabulary words and its uses, some beautiful lines from the lesson, and values that you have picked up from the lesson. These are certain points which you need to keep in your mind before you start any lesson and after the end of the lesson. About the writer of this lesson is Herbert George Wells, born on 21 September 1866. He was an English writer. He was prolific in many genres, writing dozens of novels, short stories, and works of social commentary, satire, biography, and autobiography, and even 2 books on recreational war games. Is now best remembered for his science fiction novels and is often called the father of science fiction. Let's start. Can a man become invisible? This is a story of a scientist who discovers how to make himself invisible. Does he use or misuse his discovery? The story Footprints Without Feet is written by H.G. Wells, which is about a scientist named Griffin. What is the name of the scientist? The scientist's name is Griffin. He discovers rare chemicals which can make a man invisible, but at the same time the man can be touched and felt physically. So here is a scientist, Griffin, who has discovered rare chemical which can make a man invisible, but the man can be touched and felt physically. Let's read out the story and find out what happens after he consumes the rare chemical, what happens with him, how he uses it, whether he uses it or misuses his powers for his own. Let's read. The 2 boys started in surprise at the fresh muddy imprints of a pair of bare feet. What was a barefooted man doing on the steps of a house in the middle of London? And where was the man? As they gazed, a remarkable sight met their eyes. A fresh footmark appeared from nowhere. Further, footprints followed, one after another, descending the steps and progressing down the street. The boys followed, fascinated, until the muddy impressions became fainter and fainter, and at last disappeared altogether. So, the meaning of muddy, which is covered in mud, imprints you already know, impress on a surface, a mark or outline on a surface. Bare, which is not covered. Gazed, the meaning of gazed is looking steadily in admiration, surprise or thought. Remarkable means worthy of attention, striking. Sight means the power of seeing. Progressing means move forward. Fascinated means strongly attracted and interested. Fainter and fainter. Fainter means barely perceptible. Bewildered, very puzzled. Eject means to leave a place, compelled to leave a place. So, now let's start the lesson. Two boys noticed a few muddy imprints of bare feet. Okay, so there are two boys who noticed bare feet, imprints of bare feet. So the two boys suddenly noticed a few muddy imprints of bare feet. They started wondering what was a barefoot man doing on the steps of a house in the middle of London. So they started thinking that where was the man then? As he was nowhere to be seen, they kept on searching where is the barefoot man and what is he doing in the middle of London. And then when they followed the imprint, they saw another footmark. But the man was still not visible. They kept on wondering and they decided to follow the imprints. As they followed them, they couldn't see the man, but they were able to see the mark of the footprints and they were following it. They kept on following it until the footprints became invisible. They were surprised. They were totally in shock. And the footprints was of a scientist who had discovered how to make the human body invisible. And it was none other than Griffin, the scientist who had been working for a long time to see how to make the human body invisible. The explanation of the mystery was really simple enough. The bewildered boys had been following a scientist who had just discovered how to make the human body transparent. Griffin, the scientist, had carried out experiment after experiment to prove that the human body could become invisible. Finally, what he discovered a rare drug, and when a person swallowed that drug, the person's body became transparent as a sheet of glass, though it also remained as solid as glass. So when he discovered it, he swallowed certain drug and his body became transparent. Brilliant scientist though he was, Griffin was rather a lawless person. His landlord disliked him and tried to eject him. In revenge, Griffin set fire to the house. To get away without being seen, he had to remove his clothes. Thus, it was that he became a homeless wanderer without clothes, without money, and quite invisible until he happened to step in some mud and left footprints as he walked. Griffin was a lawless person, as he had once burned down the house of his landlord, who was trying to eject him, who was trying to throw him out of the house. Then, as he wanted to be invisible, he had to remove his clothes and then roam around without clothes and without money. Thus, it was that he became a homeless wanderer without clothes. His presence was felt after he stepped in some mud, and his footprints could be seen as he walked. So, he kind of became a homeless wanderer without clothes, without money, and he became quite invisible. Somebody noticed him, like the two boys noticed him in some mud, and he left footprints as he walked. Move to the next page. Let's see what happened next in the lesson. He escaped easily enough from the boys who followed his footprints in London. But his adventures were by no means over. He had chosen a bad time of the year to wander about London without clothes. It was midwinter. The air was bitterly cold and he could not do without clothes. Instead of walking about the streets, he decided to slip into a big London store for warmth. So, he managed to escape from the boys who had followed him, but he had many more adventures coming up. And the worst time of the year that he had chosen was the midwinter. It was very cold that time. It was bitterly cold, chilling cold, and he was also feeling cold. So in order to search for warmth, he entered in London. He entered in a big London store for warmth. He decided to stay inside the store, and as he went inside the store, the closing time arrived and doors of the store were shut and nobody was there inside. And then he had the most pleasurable time of his life. What he did? He gave himself the pleasure of clothing and feeding himself without regard to expense. As he was there in the big London store, he could have anything from the store. There were food, there were clothes. He could choose anything from anywhere and have the pleasure of all the things present there. He got food to eat, he wore new clothes without paying for, and the most enjoyable thing was that he did not have to pay. He then found cold meat and coffee in the kitchen and he ate them all. After that, he also had sweets, wine from the grocery store. He had them all and then finally slept on a pile of quilts. If only Griffin had managed to wake up in good time, all might have been well. As it was, he did not wake up until the assistants were already arriving next morning. So, he slept until the next morning when the assistants came and started approaching him. He became nervous and started running away. It would have been very easy for him if he would have wake up before the assistants arrive and he could have managed to leave the place, hiding in different places and then finally out. But he kept on sleeping until the assistants arrived, and assistants chased after him, and he started running to save his life. He escaped only because what he did? He quickly removed his new clothes that he was wearing from the store. And as soon as he removed the clothes from his body one by one, he became invisible and transparent, therefore making him difficult to be caught by the assistants. He became invisible and naked, again running for his life without any money in the chill air of January. This time he decided to try the stock of a theatrical company. Now, the next destination was the stock of a theatrical company. He finally found a place there, in the hope of finding not only clothes but also sometimes that would hide the empty space above his shoulders. Theatricals, what do you mean by theatrical? Theatrical means relating to acting, actors, or the theatre. but also sometimes that would hide the empty space above his shoulder. Shivering. Shivering means shaking slightly and uncontrollably due to cold. Shivering with cold, he hurried to Drury Lane, the center of the theatre world. He soon found a suitable shop. He made his way, invisible, upstairs and came out a little later, wearing bandages round his forehead, dark glasses, false nose, big bushy side whiskers. What are whiskers? Whiskers are long projecting hair growing from the face of many mammals. You must have seen the whiskers. And a large hat. To escape without being seen, he carelessly, the word carelessly, which means in a way that shows an insensitive and cruel disregard for others. So he carelessly attacked the shopkeeper from behind, after which he robbed him of all the money he could find. Now, he decides to try the clothing of the theatrical world, as he knew that he would surely find something there to cover his face with. He would not only find the clothes there, but the other things, the costumes and the props, false moustaches, hats, and others. So, he quickly reached Drury Lane, the center of the theatrical world, as he was shivering with cold. He needed some clothes to wear. He was feeling very cold. Now he found a shop according to his needs and he entered it. Now, what do you see? You see that as he came out from the shop, he was wearing bandages around his forehead. He was also wearing a false nose, also side whiskers and a hat. He came out wearing all these things. As he did not have any money, he attacked the shopkeeper and robbed him of all his money. So this was a bad deed that he performed. He took advantage of his being transparent. What he did? He attacked the shopkeeper and robbed him of all his money. He felt that London was too crowded and decided to go to a small village nearby. Easily noticed that Griffin the scientist had been taking advantages of his power. He was a genius. He was a great scientist that he could discover a rare drug, but he was kind of misusing it. For the past two incidents that we have read just now shows that though he had made a discovery, but the discoveries that one makes might turns into a disaster if you misuse it. We are going to continue this lesson in the next tutorial. I want you, all the students, to go through these 3 pages of your book, read it thoroughly, do intensive reading. I'm going to tell you again and again. There are certain points that are important, like I've already told you in the beginning of the lesson, about the writer, message, theme. You must focus on your vocabulary, your pronunciation, and your deep analytical and deep understanding of the lesson. Assignment for the first part of the lesson is there in your homework portal. The answers should be of your own, no copying from the internet. Okay? Thank you.